My daughter canceled my celebration, claiming that nobody would attend. But I watched as 50 luxury cars pulled up in front of the main entrance. My name is Adelaida. I am 80 years old, and for decades I owned a catering service. She has no idea that the party was moved to a different location that very same day. The morning sunlight poured intensely through the large windows of my bedroom, illuminating the specks of dust floating in the air like subtle reminders of the relentless passage of time. I carefully buttoned my emerald green tailored suit, the one I ordered 20 years ago and which still fits my figure perfectly. I am not one to spend the day in a robe, although my daughter Lorena would prefer to see me that way, defeated, in slippers, with the permanent smell of confinement. That day I turned 80 years old. 80 years of coming into the world, of struggling, of building a gastronomic empire from nothing, and of raising 2 children alone. Yet for Lorena, this was a day to stay calm, a polite way of saying, "Don't get in the way and stay out of sight." I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. Although wrinkles cross my face like old road maps, my eyes still hold that dark, shrewd spark that used to make the vendors at the Central Market tremble when they tried to sell me spoiled goods. I applied my signature crimson lipstick, the same shade I wore when closing contracts for weddings of 500 people. "Mom, what are you doing dressed like that?" Lorena's voice rang out from the half-open door. She didn't even knock. It has been a long time since she asked permission in this house. My house, even though she behaves as if she has already inherited it. I turned slowly, resting my hands on the silver knob of my cane. I don't need it to walk. My legs are still strong, thanks to decades of standing in industrial kitchens, but the cane commands respect. It is a psychological tool. "It's my birthday, Lorena. Did you expect me to greet my guests in pajamas?" I answered firmly, controlling the tremor of indignation that ran down my spine. Lorena let out a long sigh, the kind adults release when annoyed by childish whims. She crossed her arms, wrinkling her silk blouse. I am convinced she bought it with the credit card in my name that she manages for my own good. "Oh, Mom," she said, stretching the vowels with a condescension that turned my stomach. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Sit down, please. I don't want you to get upset." I did not sit. I remained standing, defiant. She hates it when I act this way. She prefers me seated, small, controllable. "What is it now?" I asked, although deep in my chest, a sharp intuition was already warning me of the blow that was coming. "Look, I've been contacting people all week," she began, avoiding my gaze and staring at her perfect nails. "And the truth is, nobody can come." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, like bread dough before it rises. "Nobody," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "I invited 50 people, my old business partners, my friends from the reading club, the longtime neighbors, even your cousins from the north." "Nobody, Mom, understand," she insisted, her voice harsher now, losing patience. "People are busy. It's Tuesday. Besides, let's be honest, at this age people forget or simply don't want to come watch an old lady blow out candles and repeat the same stories. It's depressing." I felt as if she had struck me, not because of the lie, but because of the cruelty she disguised as honesty. Repeat stories. Me, who still remembers by heart the recipes of 300 dishes and the name of every client I served at Banquetes La Orquídea for 40 years. "So," Lorena continued, gaining confidence when she saw I didn't raise my voice, "I decided to cancel everything. I called the catering service and told them not to come. I took down the tables in the garden. It's for the best, Mom. You save yourself the humiliation of waiting alone for people who will never arrive." I walked to my nightstand and picked up my old ledger, a worn leather notebook that Lorena has never bothered to examine. She thinks they are just an old woman's scribbles, but there I record absolutely everything. "You canceled everything?" I asked softly. "Yes, And please, don't make a scene. I'll bring you some vegetable soup to your room and we can watch television together for a while if you want. But don't go out. Don't dress like that. You look ridiculous. Stay in your room. Rest. At your age, excitement can harm you." Lorena turned and left, slamming the door shut. I heard her turn the key from the outside. She had locked me in. The humiliation was not only social, it was domestic, intimate, violent in its delicacy. She was treating me like a prisoner in the palace I had built brick by brick. I stood motionless for a few moments, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. She was surely going to call her husband, that useless man who spends his days squandering my capital on illusory projects, to tell him the old lady was under control. Yet I felt no desire to cry. Tears dried up long ago for family disappointments. What I felt was a cold flame in my chest, the same one I felt before hosting a presidential banquet or a high society wedding. Pure adrenaline. I walked to the window overlooking the main street. My room is on the second floor, with a privileged view of the entrance. Lorena assumes I am blind, or that my mind wanders, but with my well-adjusted bifocals, my vision is flawless. I looked down. The street was calm, bathed in midday sun. Then the first vehicle appeared. An old but immaculate black Mercedes. I recognized it instantly. It belonged to Don Gregorio, my wine supplier for 30 years, and a great friend. Behind it came a gray family SUV, the Ramirez's, my neighbors who moved 2 years ago but never stopped staying in touch. And then another, and another. In minutes, the street in front of my house was full. These were not ordinary cars, taxis, private vehicles, even the corner florist's van. I counted mentally, 10, 20, 30, 50 people. They were all there. Lorena had lied shamelessly. Either she never called anyone to cancel, or if she did, nobody paid attention. Or worse, perhaps she said something awful to discourage them, but they came anyway to check on me. I saw my daughter run toward the main gate. From my window, I watched her exaggerated gestures. She was waving her arms, disheveled, panic on her face. I could imagine her words. "You got the wrong day. My mom is sick. Go away." But nobody moved. They got out with gifts, cakes, musical instruments. I saw the mariachis tuning their guitars on the sidewalk. I smiled, a crooked smile, loaded with bitter satisfaction. Lorena thought she could erase me. She thought that by taking away my landline and controlling my cell phone, she could isolate me from the world. But she underestimated something essential. I am Adelaida, the woman who fed half the town in their happiest and saddest moments. People do not forget the taste of a good hand, nor the warmth of honest treatment. Loyalty is an ingredient my daughter never learned to prepare. I opened the secret drawer in my wardrobe, the one with the false bottom where I keep what is truly valuable. Not the jewelry Lorena has gradually pawned, but my documents, the deed to the house, my private bank accounts opened years ago under my maiden name, and a set of keys. The keys to my new address. 6 months ago, when Lorena yelled at me because I dropped a glass of water and told me I should consider a nursing home because I was a burden, I made a decision. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I simply acted. I used my contacts, called Doña Piedad's son, who is a lawyer, and asked him to find me something. A house. Not a nursing home, not a borrowed room. A spacious, bright house with a large garden where I could grow my aromatic herbs. I found it a few blocks away. I bought it in secret, signing the papers in the park while telling Lorena I was going to Mass. That day, the celebration was not just a birthday. It was an inauguration. I looked out the window again. Lorena was now arguing with Don Gregorio, who was shaking his head and pointing toward my window. She looked up and saw me. She saw me standing, dressed in emerald, with red lips and head held high. She didn't see the old woman she despised. She saw the matriarch I have always been. I raised my hand and greeted my guests, a majestic, slow, dignified salute. They responded with cheers that, although muffled by the glass, reached my heart like an injection of vitality. Lorena turned pale. I could see the terror in her eyes, even from that distance. She knew she had lost control of the story. Nobody will come, she had told me, and there they all were. But there was one more exquisite detail about to happen. I took from my purse a small, basic cell phone with large keys that I had bought secretly at the pharmacy. I dialed Don Gregorio's number. I saw him answer below, looking up at my window. "Adelaida," he said with concern in his voice. "Gregorio, my dear," I replied clearly and firmly. "Thank you for coming. Tell everyone not to get out. The party is not here." "What do you mean, not here? Your daughter says you're unwell." "My daughter lies, Gregorio, as always. But listen carefully. Do you see the moving truck turning the corner right now?" Gregorio turned his head. A large white truck appeared at the end of the street, approaching slowly. "Yes, I see it." "Good. Follow it when I come out. We're moving to my new house. The party begins when I cross that door." "But, Adelaida, are you leaving?" "I'm not leaving, Gregorio. I'm setting myself free." I hung up and put the phone in my jacket pocket. The moving truck stopped right behind the guests' cars, blocking Lorena's vehicle. The driver, a strong young man I had hired the week before, got out and rang the bell insistently, ignoring my daughter's screams. It was time. I took my small leather suitcase, which I had already prepared under the bed the night before. Only the essentials: my documents, old photos I managed to rescue, my original recipe book, and my mother's jewelry. Everything else, furniture, curtains, expensive paintings, let Lorena keep them. Let her keep the empty shell of this house she had turned into a cold prison. I approached the door of my room. It was locked, of course. Lorena thought that would stop me. I reached into my pocket for the master key copy I had kept since the day my late husband and I built this house. A key that opens every door without exception. I inserted it into the lock. The mechanism made a soft, satisfying click, like the sound of an oven timer indicating the cake is ready. I opened the door. The hallway was silent, but outside I could hear the commotion of 50 bewildered people and one hysterical daughter. I walked toward the stairs. Each step echoed on the wood, marking the rhythm of my heart. I was not afraid. I was 80 years old, but I felt 20 and about to open my first business. The injustice had lasted too long. I had tolerated her bad faces, her petty thefts, her contempt for my age, her attempts to make me feel useless. "Stay in your room," she had said. "Nobody wants to see you." Well, now everyone would see me, and she would see something she never anticipated. Her mother not as a burden, but as a force of nature ready to change her destiny forever. I reached the ground floor. The front door was wide open. Sunlight flooded in, outlining Lorena's silhouette as she continued arguing at the entrance. I struck the floor with my silver cane, a sharp, metallic, authoritative blow on the tiles of the foyer. The sound cut through the air. Lorena turned abruptly. She froze when she saw me there, in the middle of the vestibule, suitcase in one hand, cane in the other, illuminated by the sun like an apparition. "Mom," she whispered with a trembling voice. "I told you to stay in your room. What are you doing with that suitcase?" I looked her in the eyes. Those eyes she inherited from me, but which lack my fire. "You told me nobody would come, Lorena," I said, and my voice rang out powerfully, carrying to the street where everyone fell silent to listen. "But you miscalculated. You didn't count on the fact that I have something you will never have." "What are you talking about? Go back upstairs," she shouted, taking a threatening step toward me. I smiled, and this time it was a genuine, radiant smile. "I'm talking about respect, my daughter. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have 50 guests waiting to see my true home." I took the first step toward the exit and knew there was no turning back. The real party was about to begin. The fear has a characteristic smell. It smells of rancid vinegar and cold sweat, the same odor that came from kitchen assistants when they ruined a bechamel sauce right before serving. And that was exactly the scent emanating from my daughter Lorena as she positioned herself between the open door and me. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, now darted erratically, scanning my suitcase, my cane, and above all, the crowd of cars parked outside that were honking in a festive chorus that to her sounded like a condemnation. "Mom, please, you're delirious," she said, lowering her voice to a hissing whisper, trying to close the front door with her body. "Come inside. The neighbors are watching. What will they think? That I've abandoned you? That you've lost your mind?" I observed her with the patience of someone who has peeled thousands of sacks of potatoes without cutting a finger. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about appearances. That facade of the devoted daughter caring for the poor, senile widow was her social safe conduct and, more importantly, her excuse for managing my finances. "Let them watch, Lorena," I replied, adjusting the collar of my emerald jacket. "In fact, I want them to watch closely. For years you've been telling the neighborhood that I no longer manage things, that I confuse sugar with salt. Today they will see who has truly lost their mind." Lorena tried to snatch the suitcase from me. It was a clumsy, desperate move. My hands, hardened by the heat of ovens and the weight of iron pots, closed around the leather handle with a strength that surprised her. She gasped and let go of the suitcase as if it burned. "It's for your own good," she squealed in a whisper. "Rogelio is on his way. I told him to bring the doctor. They'll sedate you if you keep up this spectacle." There was the implicit threat, the card they always play when the old woman gets difficult. Rogelio, my son-in-law, that man with the hollow smile who has been managing my commercial properties for 5 years without reporting a single profit. I felt no fear, only clarity. During the last few months, while Lorena and Rogelio talked in the kitchen, believing I was napping in front of the television, I listened. I listened to how they planned to sell the big house once the old woman was gone. I listened to how they complained about the cost of my medications. I listened and evaluated. "Let Rogelio come," I said, with a calm that disarmed her more than any shout. In fact, I would love for him to see how his plans go down the drain. But I don't have time to wait for failures. My guests are hungry. I took a step forward. Lorena retreated, bumping into the doorframe. In that instant, I understood that power is not begged for, it is reclaimed. And I had just reclaimed it. To understand how I reached this moment, standing at the door with my dignity intact and a suitcase full of memories, one must understand that a businesswoman never fully retires. Lorena made the mistake of a beginner. She underestimated the inventory. She controlled the main bank checking account. Yes, she had my pension card and checked the mail for statements. But Lorena never knew about the Southern warehouse. 30 years ago, I bought a vacant lot in the industrial zone, an ugly place full of weeds where I planned to build a giant kitchen. I never did. The lot remained there forgotten, accumulating value as the city grew around it. The deeds were not in the house safe, but taped behind the vegetable drawer in the old basement refrigerator that Lorena never opens because she says it smells old. 6 months ago, when my daughter forbade me from going to the gardening club because I was no longer up for those trots, I made a call. I didn't use the house phone. I used the gardener's, a good boy I pay with homemade empanadas. I called Roberto, the son of my friend Piedad, a shrewd lawyer who still calls me Aunt Adelaida. "Sell it, mijo," I told him. "Sell the southern lot. I want liquidity, and I want a new house. In my name, so nobody finds out." The sale was quick. A construction company paid cash and in full for the location. Roberto handled everything. While Lorena thought I was at medical appointments, I was signing papers at the notary, drinking coffee, and laughing with the officials. With that money, I bought the house on Los Fresnos Street. A single-story house, without treacherous stairs, with a patio full of light, and a kitchen. My God, a kitchen with a central island where I can knead without my back hurting. But it wasn't just the money. It was the network. Lorena thinks the world moves through the internet and apps. I know the world moves through favors and loyalties. Don Gregorio, the wine man, is not just a supplier. He is the man whose large debt I forgave when his wife fell ill with cancer 10 years ago. The Ramirezes, my neighbors, are the couple to whom I gifted their daughter's wedding banquet when the groom lost his job a week before. Every person in those 50 cars outside owed me something. Not money, but gratitude. And the gratitude of decent people is stronger than any rumor my daughter could invent. Lorena thought she had me cornered in my room without resources, dependent on her charity for vegetable soup. She didn't know I had an army waiting for my signal, and a secret bank account sufficiently plump to live like a queen for the years God grants me. I looked my daughter in the eyes and saw something that hurt me more than her betrayal. I saw a stranger. For years I blamed myself. I thought, where did I fail? I gave her the best education, sent her to the best schools. She never lacked a hot meal. But there are people born with a dry soul, like sterile land where nothing grows no matter how much you water it. I remember 3 years ago at Christmas. I had spent 2 days cooking the stuffed turkey with my special recipe of nuts and sweet wine. When I served it, proud, with my hands trembling from the effort, Lorena didn't even taste it. "Mom, this has too much fat," she said, pushing the plate away. "You should stop cooking. You no longer have the touch. Besides, you dirtied the whole kitchen, and the cleaning lady doesn't come until Monday." That night I cried silently while washing the dishes. I felt useless. I believed her lie. I looked at my hands and saw them old, ugly, useless. I stopped cooking for a whole year. I consumed myself. I made myself small to fit in the little box where she wanted to put me. But today, seeing the sunlight reflect on the chrome of my friends' cars, I understood the great scam. It's not that I'm useless. It's that it suited her for me to be useless. If I am strong, she has no control. If I am lucid, she has no access to my money. If I am respected, she remains in the background. My old age was not my problem. It was her strategy. She needed a dependent mother to feel powerful. She needed a victim to justify her greed. "You're crazy," Lorena shouted, snapping me out of my thoughts. She was crying now, tears of pure rage. "Those people are going to laugh at you. You're going to make a fool of yourself and drag me down with you." "The fool," I repeated, savoring the word. The fool is living 80 years only to end up asking permission in your own house. That is truly foolish, daughter. And it's over. I raised my cane and pointed toward the street, not like an old woman asking for help, but like a general ordering her troops to advance. Step aside, Lorena. She did not move. She was paralyzed by disbelief. She did not recognize the woman in front of her. She was looking for the submissive little old lady in slippers, but she found Adelaida, the owner of Banquetes La Orquídea. The difference between how she sees me and who I really am is abysmal. She sees wrinkles. I see experience. She sees slowness. I see caution. She sees silence. I see planning. And that miscalculation was going to cost her dearly. The moving boy, a sturdy young man named Mateo, climbed the porch steps with firm strides. He wore a cap and a friendly smile. Doña Adelaida, he greeted, completely ignoring my daughter. The truck is ready. Is this the suitcase? Yes, Mateo, just this. Be careful with the zipper, it's a bit stuck. Lorena turned to him with wild eyes. You're not taking anything, she shouted, trying to block his path. I'm going to call the police. This is kidnapping. They're kidnapping my mother. Mateo stopped and looked at me, waiting for instructions. He didn't seem scared, just a bit uncomfortable with the shouting. Nobody is kidnapping me, I said firmly, projecting my voice so the curious neighbors already peeking over the fences could hear. I am moving of my own free will, and I have a medical certificate of mental lucidity signed yesterday by Dr. Cardenas to prove it, in case anyone thinks of calling the authorities. I pulled the paper from my purse and waved it in the air. Lorena turned pale. Dr. Cardenas was the family doctor of a lifetime, an eminent figure in the city. If he stated that I was sane, not even the most corrupt judge could contradict him. Yesterday, Lorena stammered. But yesterday you were at Mass. Yes, the Mass was very productive, I winked at her. Mateo took the suitcase gently and went down the stairs to the truck. I followed him. Each step I took away from that door was like removing a brick from my back. I felt the fresh air on my face, the sun warming my skin through the tailored suit. When I reached the sidewalk, the spectacle was wonderful. Don Gregorio got out of his Mercedes and ran to open the back door for me, but not of his car. He had brought something special. Behind his car was an old convertible, a cream-colored Cadillac that he used to rent for the most exclusive weddings. For the queen of the day, Gregorio said, making an exaggerated bow that drew applause from the other guests. He helped me up. The leather seat was warm and comfortable. I sat down and placed my cane beside me. From that position, I had a perfect view of the house I was leaving behind. Lorena was still on the threshold of the door, small, defeated, furious. She held the phone to her ear, surely yelling at Rogelio. She looked like a child whose favorite toy had been taken away. But I wasn't finished. I had one last farewell gift. I signaled to Mateo. He nodded, reached into the pocket of his vest, and pulled out a thick white sealed envelope. He ran up the stairs and handed it to Lorena. She took it suspiciously. "What is this?" she asked, lowering the phone. "Open it," I murmured to myself from the car. I watched her tear open the envelope. She pulled out a folded document. It was the legal notification Roberto had prepared. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. It was something much simpler and more devastating. The cancellation of the notarial powers and the notice of disconnection of services to the main house. The house was in my name, but the utilities, thanks to an old tax trick by Rogelio, were billed to my business account, the one I had just emptied and closed that very morning. Starting the next day, if Lorena wanted electricity, water, or gas in that huge mansion, she would have to pay for them with her own money. And I knew better than anyone that Lorena and Rogelio didn't have a single cent of their own. They lived off me. I saw her read the first lines. Her mouth formed a perfect O. She looked up at me with a mixture of terror and absolute understanding. For the first time in years, she looked at me with respect. The respect born of fear. "Mom!" she shouted, taking a step toward the street. But she stopped when she saw the looks of the 50 guests forming a human barrier between her and me. "Let's go, Gregorio," I ordered, raising my hand like a queen greeting her people. The Cadillac's engine roared with elegant power. The mariachis, who had climbed onto an open pickup truck, began playing El Rey, but changed the lyrics to La Reina. The caravan began to move. 50 cars full of people who loved me, who respected me, and who were ready to celebrate my 80 years as it should be. I looked in the rearview mirror. Lorena grew smaller and smaller, a solitary figure at the door of a big, empty house. For a second, I felt a pang of motherly pity, but then I remembered the vegetable soup, the confinement, the forced solitude, and the pity turned to dust. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of gasoline, of fresh flowers brought by the guests, and above all, of freedom. I turned forward toward the open road. My new house awaited me. My new life began that day at 80 years old. And I had the slight suspicion that the banquet that night was going to have an especially sweet flavor. "Gregorio," I said, raising my voice over the music. "I hope you're hungry." "I'm hungry for a party, Adelaida," he replied, laughing. "Well, get ready, because old Adelaida is back in the kitchen." The car turned the corner and my daughter's house disappeared from view. I didn't look back. There was no need. The best was yet to come. The cream-colored Cadillac stopped gently in front of the rustic wooden gate on Los Fresnos Street. When I got out, the air felt different. It didn't smell of confinement or medicine, but of jasmine and wet earth, that aroma of living, growing things. My 50 guests parked wherever they could, filling the street with vibrant energy that the new neighborhood neighbors watched curiously from their windows. Not with judgment, but with the desire to join the party. I opened the front door with my own key, without asking permission, without fear that someone would scold me for making noise. The house was not a cold mansion like the one I left behind. It was an open space with bone-colored walls and huge windows that let the afternoon light pour in. But the most important thing, the heart of this place, was the kitchen. I walked straight to it, ignoring the initial greetings. My low-heeled shoes rang with authority on the new ceramic floor. There it was, a central granite island, 6-burner industrial stoves, and a space so wide you could dance a waltz while chopping onions. "Mateo!" I called to the moving boy who was entering carrying a heavy box marked with red tape. "That box here, on the island, right now." Mateo obeyed instantly. With hands already showing the marks of age but still firm, I tore the tape. There were no jewels or clothes inside. There was steel. I pulled out my black leather case, the one I hadn't touched in 3 years, since Lorena decided it was dangerous for an old woman to handle sharp objects. I unrolled the case on the granite. The soft clink of knives was music to my ears. There they were, my 20-centimeter chef's knife, the boning knife, the filleting knife. They shone under the hanging lights, immaculate, awaiting my orders. I stroked the wooden handle of the first one. It fit my palm as if we had never been apart. "Adelaida!" shouted Don Gregorio, entering with 2 boxes of red wine. "This is a palace. But what are we going to eat? Your daughter said she canceled the banquet." I turned with the knife in my hand and a smile I hadn't used in a long time. That smile of the business owner that mixes hospitality with military command. My daughter canceled her order, Gregorio, I said, pointing toward the backyard where the Ramirez's laughter could already be heard. But she forgot that I don't need to hire banquets. I am the banquet. I signaled to the women from the reading club and two of my former kitchen assistants who had come in the caravan. I didn't have to say much. They saw the sparkle in my eyes and the knives on the table. They took off their elegant jackets, rolled up the sleeves of their silk blouses, and washed their hands. In 10 minutes, my kitchen, which had been silent and empty that morning, became an orchestra of chopping, frying, and seasoning. This was not just any birthday party. It was the return of the general to her headquarters. While I organized the production line to make tinga tostadas and chorizo sopes for 50 people with the ingredients my friends had brought just in case, I felt the cheap phone vibrate in my pocket. I took it out and looked at the screen. "Daughter," flashed insistently. It was the 10th time in the last 20 minutes. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. It wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. For years, Lorena had given me the silent treatment when I behaved badly. She left me talking to myself, ignored me for days to punish me. Now, she was tasting a spoonful of her own soup, and apparently, it was burning her tongue. I imagined the scene in the old house. Rogelio had probably already arrived in his cheap suit and that strong cologne he uses to hide the smell of cigarettes. They would be in the living room surrounded by silence, realizing that the crazy old woman had taken more than a suitcase. She had taken the life out of that house. "Doña Adelaida, the oil is already hot," Carmela, one of my former cooks, informed me, pulling me from my thoughts. I put the phone away. Revenge could wait. My guest's hunger could not. "I'm not going back there," I replied, taking a large onion. The first cut was precise, quick. The outer layer fell, revealing the white, fresh interior. That's how I felt. They had forcibly stripped away my old, dry layers, and now what remained was more alive than ever. As the aroma of the stew began to fill the house, I knew the real plan was just beginning. Lorena thought this was a one-day tantrum. She didn't know I was cooking her defeat over low heat. 2 hours passed. The Los Fresnos house vibrated. The mariachis played in the garden, and the sound of trumpets mixed with the clinking of glasses and boisterous laughter. I didn't sit for a single minute. I went from group to group with a silver tray I had rescued from the move, serving, asking, making sure nobody lacked anything. My legs, which, according to Lorena's doctor, were weak and prone to falls, held me up with enviable firmness. Adrenaline is the best calcium there is. That's when I saw Roberto, Piedad's lawyer's son, enter. He came in an impeccable suit, but with his tie loosened and a mischievous grin. He approached, took a tostada from the tray, and winked at me. "Aunt Adelaida, you have to hear what's happening on the other side of the city," he whispered, chewing with pleasure. "Tell me, my boy, are they very worried about my health?" I asked ironically, wiping my hands on the apron. "More like worried about the health of their wallets," Roberto laughed. "The notary called me 10 minutes ago. He says Rogelio was there furious. He wanted to know why his signature no longer worked to withdraw money from the company account." I felt a cold satisfaction in my chest. Rogelio, my son-in-law, the businessman, a man who never knew the difference between gross income and net profit. And what did the notary tell him? What you instructed, that the owner, you, revoked all powers yesterday morning. Rogelio threatened to sue for mental incapacity. He said they had brainwashed you. "Poor thing," I murmured, taking a sip of my wine glass. "And Lorena is calling emergency services, Adelaida. She's saying you're lost, that you ran away." "Lost," I said, pointing to the 50 people dancing and eating around me. "I've never been more located in my life." "I know. That's why I took the liberty of calling the zone police commander. He's my wife's cousin, remember? I told him you're here celebrating your birthday, and that if he receives calls from your daughter, they are false alarms due to a family conflict. I patted Roberto on the cheek. That boy was worth his weight in gold. Thank you, mijo. But get ready, because when they realize they can't get money out of me and the police aren't coming to look for me, they'll come themselves. Let them come, Roberto said, turning serious. Here I have the property papers for this house. If they step on the garden without invitation, it's trespassing. At that moment, my phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a call, it was a text message. I put on the glasses hanging from my neck to read it. It was from Rogelio. Adelaida, stop playing. We're coming over. Lorena is having a nervous breakdown. You have to sign some checks for tomorrow's suppliers, or the business sinks. Don't be selfish. I reread it. Don't be selfish. For 40 years, I got up at 4 a.m. to go to the market. I carried boxes, fought prices, burned my hands. I lost time with my children to secure their future. I paid for Lorena's university, paid for her wedding, paid Rogelio's gambling debts 5 years ago without saying anything so as not to embarrass them. And now I was the selfish one? I looked at my guests. Don Gregorio was telling an anecdote, laughing heartily. Mrs. Ramirez was dancing with her grandson. Everyone was happy. Nobody looked at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. I decided it was time to answer, not with words, but with actions. I called Don Gregorio and asked him to lower the music volume for a moment. Silence fell gradually. Everyone looked at me expecting a thank you speech or perhaps an announcement of fatigue. Friends, I said clearly, without a microphone, projecting as they taught me in the village theater 60 years ago. My son-in-law says the business will sink if I don't sign some checks. A murmur ran through the room. Some knew about the problems, others didn't, but everyone knew Rogelio. He says I'm selfish. I continued walking among them. But I think the problem is that Rogelio and Lorena forgot who built the ship. They think Banquetes La Orquídea is a name on paper, a bank account. I stopped in front of the main table where I had placed an old photo of my husband and me inaugurating our first location. They don't know, I said, looking my former suppliers in the eyes, that the business is not the premises. The business is me. The business is trust. That's right, Doña Adelaida, shouted the owner of the main butcher shop from the back. That's why I want to make an announcement, I continued. Banquetes La Orquídea, as you know it, closes its doors today. Total silence. I could see the confusion on their faces. Closes for them, I clarified, raising my glass. Because starting tomorrow, I will operate from here under a new name, and all the contracts Rogelio has pending. Well, I'm going to need help to fulfill them because I'm afraid he won't have money to pay you for the supplies. The smiles returned wider than before. They understood the play. I wasn't destroying the business. I was rescuing it from the claws of incompetence. I was cutting the blood flow that fed the parasites. Count on us, Adelaida, toasted Gregorio. If Rogelio wants wine, let him go to the supermarket and pay cash. Laughter erupted again, but was interrupted by a discordant sound outside. A sudden break followed by the sharp slam of a car door, closing violently. The atmosphere in the room changed. Tension descended like a heavy curtain. I knew that sound. It was Rogelio's truck. I walked to the front window. There they were. The truck, poorly parked, blocking my neighbor's entrance. Rogelio got out first, face red and tie flying. Lorena got out next, but she didn't look angry like him. She looked scared, small, staring at the new house with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe that her mother, the old woman who should be in bed, had bought this. Roberto immediately stood beside me. Don't go out, Aunt. I'll handle it. No, Roberto, I stopped him, placing my hand on his arm. This is not a legal matter. It's a matter of hierarchy. Stay here, but keep the phone ready." I opened the front door and stepped out onto the small porch. I didn't go down the stairs. I stayed up there, looking down at them from on high, leaning on my cane with the golden light of sunset behind me, creating a silhouette that must have seemed imposing to them. Rogelio came up the sidewalk, gesticulating. "Adelaida, what the hell is this?" he shouted, not caring that there were 50 witnesses peeking from windows and the open door. "I tried to pay for gas and the corporate card is blocked. You made me look like a fool." I looked at him without blinking. I didn't even get upset. His anger seemed as insignificant as the buzz of a fly. "Good afternoon to you too, Rogelio. I see you came to congratulate me on my birthday," I said, with icy calm. "Cut the sarcasm," he roared, reaching the foot of the stairs. "You have to unblock the accounts right now, and you have to come back home. Lorena is sick with nerves because of you." Lorena approached slowly, staying behind her husband. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the question that was eating her. "How did you do this? Where did you get the money?" "This is my house, Rogelio," I replied, pointing to the facade. "And in my house, we don't shout." "You don't have a house. You live with us because you can't fend for yourself," he shouted, climbing the first step threateningly. It was a mistake. The moment his foot touched my staircase, 3 men came out of the house and stood beside me. They weren't bodyguards. They were Mateo the mover, the Ramirez's son, who is a gym instructor, and Don Gregorio, who, despite being 70 years old, has hands as big as shovels. Rogelio stopped dead. He looked at the 3 men, then at me. "Are you going to sick your dogs on me?" he spat with contempt. "They're not my dogs, Rogelio. They're my friends." "Something you've never had because you don't know what loyalty is," I said, stepping down 1 step, getting close enough to smell his fear. "And about the accounts? They're not blocked by mistake. They're closed." "Closed?" His voice cracked. "But there are scheduled payments. The mortgage on the premises, Lorena's car, all that is in the company's name, right?" I smiled softly. As majority partner and founder, I decided to dissolve the partnership this morning. The liquid assets, that is, my money, are safe in another bank. The debts? Well, as general manager you signed to be 5 years ago, I think they are your responsibility. Rogelio turned as pale as old wax. He finally understood the magnitude of the abyss he was standing in. Without my money, he was nothing. Just a man with debts and expensive tastes. Lorena let out a choked sob. "Mom, are you going to leave us on the street?" she asked, with that childish voice she used to manipulate me. I looked at her. I saw the woman who locked me in. I saw the woman who told me nobody would come to my party. I saw the woman who took the keys to my own life. "No, daughter. You have the old house, you have expensive furniture, you have paintings. Sell them, work. Do what I did at 20 when your father died and I was left alone with you. Learn to survive." "But we don't know how to do anything," Lorena exclaimed. And the confession was so pathetic that some guests let out nervous laughter. "Then it's a good time to learn," I replied. "Now please, leave. You're blocking the entrance and I'm waiting for dessert." "This isn't going to stay like this," Rogelio threatened, but his voice no longer had strength. It was the cry of a wounded animal. "I'm going to declare you incompetent. I'm going to bring a judge." "Do it," Roberto challenged, appearing over my shoulder. "I'm her lawyer, and I have security recordings from the old house where you can be seen taking money from Adelaida's safe. Do you want us to present them to the judge?" Rogelio shut his mouth abruptly. He looked at Roberto, looked at me, and understood he was in checkmate. There was no possible move. He turned around, grabbed Lorena roughly by the arm, and dragged her toward the truck. She looked at me one last time as they put her in the car. There was no hate in her gaze, only absolute terror at the uncertain future that was coming at her. They drove off, leaving a cloud of black smoke. I stood there a moment, looking at the empty street. Silence returned to the neighborhood, but this time it was the silence of victory. My lungs filled with fresh air. I felt no guilt. I felt I had removed a backpack of stones I had been carrying for too long. I turned to my guests, to my new house, to my kitchen full of light. "Well," I said, gently tapping the floor with my cane, "we've taken out the trash. Now, who wants cake?" Cheers rang out throughout the block. I entered my house, closing the door behind me, leaving the past and those who didn't know how to value it outside. The night was young, and I, Adelaida, was just beginning to live. But in the back of my mind, an idea was beginning to form. Rogelio was a coward, but Lorena was my daughter, and desperation can make people do unthinkable things. I knew they would return, and next time, they wouldn't just come to shout. I would have to be prepared. The morning after my escape had a different flavor from the last 10 years. I wasn't awakened by Lorena's complaints about the dirty coffee maker, nor by Rogelio's door slams as he rushed out pretending to work. I was awakened by silence, a sweet silence, interrupted only by the song of a pair of sparrows nesting in the guava tree in my new patio. I got up slowly, feeling the warm wooden floor under my bare feet. My back didn't hurt. It's curious how the body stops complaining when the soul removes a weight. I walked to the kitchen, that marvel of open space I had bought with my own money, and started brewing pot coffee with cinnamon and piloncillo, the way I like it, and the way Lorena despised it for being village drink. While the aroma filled the house, the doorbell rang. It wasn't an insistent buzz, but a courteous one. It was Roberto, my lawyer, with a smile that didn't fit on his face and a folder under his arm. "Good morning, Aunt Adelaida," he said as he entered, accepting the steaming cup I offered him. "I hope you slept well, because on the other side of the city, the night was long." We sat at the small breakfast table. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the dust particles that here didn't seem like dirt, but new life. "Tell me, boy." "Don't omit details," I asked, blowing on the steam of my coffee. Roberto opened the folder. At 6 in the morning, the utility disconnection order was executed at the mansion. Rogelio tried to stop the electric company technicians, claiming it was an administrative error. But when they asked him for the contract holder, he had to admit it was you. And since you gave the disconnection order yesterday afternoon, well, let's say your daughter's breakfast today was cold. I felt a pang in my stomach, a mixture of satisfaction and that old maternal guilt that is so hard to uproot. I imagined Lorena, who doesn't even know how to light a match, trying to shower with ice-cold water. She, who needs 3 hours of blow-drying and flat-ironing her hair before going out. "And the gas?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Cut off. And the internet and cable television service, too. Basically, they're camping in a luxury house." Roberto pulled out another paper from the folder. It was a printed email. "But that's not the worst, Adelaida. Rogelio has a much bigger problem than cold water. Today is Senator Montemayor's daughter's wedding. Do you remember?" Of course I remembered. It was the event of the year. 500 people, 5-course menu. I had designed the menu 3 months ago. Walnut cream, filet and morel sauce, fig tart. Rogelio had bragged that he was directing the event, although I had made all the shopping lists and staff scheduling from my confinement in the room. "The wedding is at 6 in the afternoon," I said, looking at the wall clock. It was 9 in the morning. If they haven't started cooking the base sauces, they're already late. "That's the point, Aunt. They have nothing to cook with." Roberto dropped the bomb gently. "The suppliers arrived at 7 at the Banquetes La Orquídea premises. Don Gregorio with the wines, the meat truck, the vegetables from the wholesale market. Rogelio tried to sign the delivery receipts, as always, on credit, charged to your business account, the account you closed yesterday." "Void," I completed the sentence, understanding where this was going. "Exactly. When the suppliers called to ask for bank authorization, the card was declined. Non-existent account. Rogelio went crazy. He started yelling that he would pay them on Monday, that it was a misunderstanding. But you know market people. I smiled. Of course I knew them. In the market, a word is worth more than a signature. But when trust is broken, no credit is valid. And Rogelio had never earned their respect. He only used mine. They took the merchandise, right? Down to the last gram of salt, Roberto confirmed. Rogelio is right now in the empty premises, with a $500,000 wedding on his shoulders, without ingredients, without gas in the industrial stoves, and with a team of waiters threatening to leave if he doesn't pay the advance in cash. I got up from the chair and walked to the window. I could see my new neighbors sweeping the sidewalk. Everything seemed calm, but in my mind, I saw the chaos that was coming. The failure of that wedding would not only sink Rogelio, it would tarnish the name I built for 40 years. La Orquídea was my name, my reputation. Lorena and Rogelio thought the business was the building, the expensive ovens, and the branded trucks. They never understood that the business was the ability to solve the impossible. Roberto, I said, turning abruptly, let's go to the market. To the market, Aunt? You should stay here. Let them sink. It's the only way they'll learn. No, mijo. If that wedding fails, the one who ends up looking bad is me before society. The senator has been my friend since before he was a politician. Besides, I want them to see something. I want them to understand once and for all where the real power lies. I put on my light coat, took my cane and that old, worn leather agenda that Rogelio always despised for being outdated. Take me to the wholesale market. The show is just beginning. The market smelled of fresh cilantro, damp earth, and ripe fruit. It's a smell that brings me back to life. I entered walking upright on Roberto's arm, greeting at every step. Doña Adelaida, blessed are the eyes, Doña Chole shouted from her dried chili stand. Godmother, have you tried today's mangoes? The butcher greeted me. It was a royal welcome. There was no hypocrisy here. These people had seen me carry boxes at 4 a.m. for decades. They knew who I was. We reached the center of the market, near the wholesale warehouses, and there was the spectacle. Rogelio was standing in front of Don Anselmo's truck, the city's main distributor of fine cuts. My son-in-law was sweating profusely, shirt stuck to his body, face contorted. Lorena was beside him wearing huge sunglasses to hide swollen eyes, and her hair pulled into a poorly made ponytail. Unmistakable sign that she hadn't had hot water that morning. Please, Anselmo, Rogelio shouted, losing composure. I'll sign you a personal promissory note. I'll leave you the title to my car. I need those fillets now. Don Anselmo, a man of few words, with arms crossed over his chest, shook his head. Sorry, young man. The boss closed the account, and with all due respect, your car isn't worth what this meat costs. Besides, you already have old debts out there that Doña Adelaida covered. Without her, you're high risk. It's robbery! I'm going to sue you for breach of contract, Lorena shrieked, intervening with that high-pitched voice she uses when she feels cornered. The contract is with Banquetes La Orquídea, and the holder is your mother, Anselmo replied calmly. If she doesn't sign, the meat doesn't come down. That's when I struck the concrete floor with my cane. The metallic sound echoed above the market bustle. Silence fell almost immediately around us. The loaders stopped. The market women stopped shouting their prices. Everyone turned. Rogelio and Lorena turned slowly. When they saw me, their expressions were a tragic poem. Rogelio went from red with anger to white with panic. Lorena took off her dark glasses, revealing deep, dark circles from a sleepless night. Mom, she whispered. I advanced toward them, not quickly, but with the inexorable pace of someone who controls time. Roberto stayed one step behind, like my Praetorian guard. "Good morning," I said, arriving right in front of them. My voice was calm, but sharp as a freshly sharpened chef's knife. "I see you're having logistics problems." "You did this!" Rogelio tried to regain his bravado, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You called everyone to block me. You're sabotaging your own daughter's future." "I didn't block anything, Rogelio. I simply stopped supporting you. There's a big difference. For years you've walked on my shoulders, thinking you were flying. Today I took the floor away from you. What you feel is gravity." Lorena approached, trying to take my hand, but I stepped back. "Mom, please," she pleaded, with tears in her eyes. "The senator's wedding. If we don't deliver, they'll deliver us. They'll sue us for millions. We'll lose the house, the cars, everything. You have to sign, please. Sign, and I promise we'll leave you in peace in your new house. But help us this time." I looked at her. She was really terrified. For the first time in her life, she was facing a real consequence without a safety net. I took my leather agenda from my purse. I opened it slowly, looking for a specific page. "Do you think the problem is the meat, daughter?" I asked softly. "Do you think that if I sign that paper, the wedding is saved?" "Of course!" Rogelio exclaimed. "I have the cooks waiting. I just need the supplies." I closed the agenda with a snap. The dry sound made them jump. "You're wrong. Your cooks quit half an hour ago." Rogelio froze. "What?" "They called me. On my new number," I explained, stroking the leather cover of my agenda. "Because they know who pays, who teaches, and who respects. They're not going to work for you, Rogelio, because they know you don't have money for this week's payroll. And they know that without my supervision, that kitchen is a ship without a captain." Rogelio ran his hands through his hair in despair. He looked about to collapse. "Then, is it over?" Lorena asked with a broken voice. "We're going to lose everything." The market was silent. Hundreds of eyes were on us. It was the public trial they feared so much. But I wasn't the one on the stand. "Senator Montemayor called me last night," I said, releasing the last piece of my strategy. "He was worried. Someone told him there were rumors of instability in the company." "Damn it," Rogelio muttered. I told him the truth, that Banquetes La Orquídea was going through a total administrative restructuring, and that, unfortunately, the former management was not qualified to handle his event. Lorena covered her mouth with her hands. "You told him that?" "But I also told him," I interrupted, raising my voice so Don Anselmo and the others could hear, that Adelaida, his friend, would personally take care of the banquet, not as a company, but as a private service. Rogelio raised his head confused, but with a glimmer of opportunistic hope in his eyes. "Then, are you going to do the wedding at the premises?" I let out a dry laugh. "In that dirty premises without gas? For God's sake, Rogelio, have a little dignity. No. The wedding is going to be cooked in my new house, and the waiters, my trusted waiters, are already there preparing everything." I turned to Don Anselmo. "Could you send the meat to Los Fresnos Street, please, to my personal account?" "At your command, Doña Adelaida," Anselmo replied with a smile, signaling his loaders to move the merchandise Rogelio had been begging for minutes earlier. Rogelio and Lorena stood there, in the middle of the aisle, empty. I had taken away the business, the employees, the suppliers, and now the most important client. I had shown them that the empire wasn't the walls, it was me. "But, and us?" Lorena asked like a lost child. "What do we do?" I approached her. This time I did take her hand, but not with affection, but with firmness. Her hands were soft, without calluses, hands that had never truly worked. You have two options, daughter. You can go to that dark, cold house to wait for the lawsuits from the other small clients I won't be able to rescue, or you can come to my new kitchen." Rogelio's eyes lit up. "We can go. We'll direct with you." "No," I cut him off sharply, erasing his smile. "You're not going to direct anything. If you come to work. Lorena, I need you washing vegetables and peeling potatoes. Rogelio, I need you in the pot washing area and taking out the trash." "Are you crazy?" Rogelio spat, offended to the core. "I'm the manager. I'm not going to wash dishes." "You were the manager," I corrected. "Now you're an unemployed debtor. The dishwasher position pays 500 pesos a day, plus hot dinner. It's the only offer on the table, and believe me, you need the money." Rogelio looked around. He saw the mocking looks of the butchers, the indifference of the loaders. His ego was being crushed in real time. "Let's go, Lorena," he said, grabbing her arm. "We're not going to humiliate ourselves like this. We'll find another way. We'll sell the jewelry. We'll get a loan." Lorena hesitated. She looked at her sweaty, failed husband. Then she looked at me, impeccable, surrounded by the respect of the entire market. She saw how Don Anselmo treated me like a queen. She saw real power. But the habit of submission is strong. She lowered her head and let herself be dragged by Rogelio. "As you wish," I said, turning around. "The offer expires in 1 hour. I have a wedding to serve." I walked toward the market exit without looking back. I heard murmurs of approval as I passed. "That's a woman of principle. Well done, Doña Adelaida." When I stepped out into the morning sun, Roberto opened the car door for me. "That was brutal, Aunt," he said, with a mixture of awe and fear. "Would you really put them to wash dishes?" "Work dignifies, Roberto, and they need a lot of dignity right now. Besides, someone has to scrub the mess from the morel sauce. It's very hard to get off." I got into the car. My heart was beating hard, not from stress, but from the pure adrenaline of victory. I had recovered my name, I had saved the event, and most importantly, I had broken the magic mirror where Lorena and Rogelio saw themselves as kings. Now they knew they were naked. I looked out the window as we drove away. I saw Rogelio and Lorena arguing on the sidewalk, alone, ignored by the world that once pretended to respect them. "Step on it, my boy," I told Roberto. "The senator wants his filet medium, and I don't make anyone wait." However, as the car moved forward, a certainty settled in my chest. Rogelio was proud, but hunger and debts are bad advisors. They hadn't accepted today, but the reality in that house without light would be unbearable in a matter of days. They would return, and when they did, they would no longer be my executioners. They would be my apprentices, or they would be nothing. The true transformation was not just changing houses, it was changing who held the handle of the pan. And now there was no doubt who owned the fire. The steam from the giant pots fogged the windows of my new kitchen, creating a warm, frantic atmosphere that smelled of glory. Toasted chilies, bitter chocolate melting for the mole, fresh vanilla from the desserts. It was 8 o'clock at night, and my house on Los Fresnos Street was not a retirement home. It was the beating heart of the most important wedding of the year. While my boys ran back and forth with silver trays, I, Adelaida, supervised the plating of the main courses with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, though my tools were wooden ladles and cotton rags. Senator Montemayor had trusted me, not a ghost company, and I had no intention of failing him. Every fillet that left my kitchen was bathed in a morel sauce as dark and shiny as the night, prepared with my own hands. The clatter of dishes, the respectful shouted orders, and the nervous laughter of the assistants were the music I had missed without knowing it. At 80 years old, I was not sitting in an armchair watching life pass. I was conducting the orchestra. Doña Adelaida, table 5 is asking for more wine, Mateo shouted, passing quickly with a tray of empty glasses. Tell Gregorio to open the reserve case, the one we kept under the stairs, I replied without looking up from the stew. And Mateo, clean that stain on your vest. Here, we serve quality, not pity. Mateo nodded and ran off. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with my forearm. I felt alive, strong, useful. But one piece was missing from this puzzle of triumph. A piece I knew would arrive sooner or later, driven by hunger and the darkness of a house without light. And then I heard the knock on the back door. It wasn't the main doorbell through which the luxury guests entered. It was a timid, almost shameful knock on the service door that opens to the alley where we take out the trash and receive sacks of potatoes. I signaled to Carmela to keep saucing the plates and walked slowly to the door. My cane struck the floor with steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I opened the door abruptly, letting the bright light of my kitchen illuminate the dark alley. There they were. They looked like ghosts of what they had been just 2 days ago. Rogelio was wearing the same suit from the market, but now wrinkled and with a grease stain on the lapel. His hair, usually slicked back arrogantly, fell disheveled over his sweaty forehead. Lorena was worse. My daughter, who wouldn't go around the corner without makeup, had a washed face, red and swollen eyes, and was wearing old jeans and an oversized t-shirt. The smell of defeat they brought with them was stronger than the aroma of my mole. Good evening, I said, blocking the entrance with my body. I didn't invite you in. In my new life, invitations are earned. Mom, Lorena's voice was a fragile thread. We're hungry. In the old house, there's no light, Rogelio added, looking at his dusty Italian shoes. And the water comes out cold. We tried to sell the wall clock, but they offered us next to nothing. I looked at them for a long time. I could have given them a plate of food at the door and sent them back to their misery. I could have slammed the door in their faces, as they did with my dreams so many times. But a mother, even a betrayed mother, has a pedagogical duty. The lesson wasn't complete. I told you I had a job offer, I replied, nodding toward the back of the kitchen, where mountains of dirty pots and sacks of unpeeled vegetables were piling up. The dishwasher and kitchen helper positions are still vacant. 500 pesos a day, plus hot dinner. Rogelio raised his eyes. There was a flash of his old pride in them, but it went out as quickly as a match in the wind when he heard his own stomach growl. Adelaida, please. I have a degree in business administration, he murmured, trying to maintain a dignity that no longer existed. I am the owner of the banquet, Rogelio. Here, titles are hung at the entrance, along with coats. What matters is what the hands do. Do you take the job, or do I close the door? Lorena took a step forward, gently pushing her husband. We'll take it, she said. And for the first time in years, I saw sincerity on her face. It was the sincerity of necessity. Please, Mom, we'll take it. I stepped aside and let them in. The contrast was brutal. They, gray and dull, entering my world of golden light and exquisite aromas. The cooks stopped for a second to look, but one glance from me was enough for them to return to their tasks. There was no time for gossip here, only for work. There are the aprons. I pointed to a hook on the wall. Rogelio, take off your jacket and roll up your shirt sleeves. Those pots have 3 hours of grease. You're going to need steel wool and a lot of arm. Lorena, sit on that bench. There are 3 sacks of potatoes and 2 of carrots for tomorrow's puree. I want the peel thin without wasting anything. Rogelio hesitated a second in front of the pile of dirty dishes. It was an intimidating mountain of steel and grease. I saw him swallow. He slowly took off his jacket, folded it carefully over a chair, and put on the thick plastic apron. When he put his hands in the soapy water, he closed his eyes as if saying goodbye to his previous life. Lorena took the peeler. Her hands trembled. At first she did it wrong, cutting large chunks of potato along with the peel. Not like that, I corrected, approaching and taking her hand with mine. I felt her cold skin under my warm fingers. Gently, daughter. Follow the shape of the potato. Respect the ingredient. If you mistreat it, it's useless. She nodded, biting her lip to keep from crying, and continued peeling. I returned to my command station. The wedding continued its course. Plates went out, compliments returned with the waiters, but my attention was divided. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched my son-in-law and daughter work. At first they did it with disgust, clumsily. But as the hours passed, something changed. The rhythm of the kitchen is contagious. It's a primitive dance. Rogelio began scrubbing furiously, channeling his frustration against the stuck grease. Lorena found a rhythm with the peeler. Scrape, 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 hypnotic and constant. They sweated, got dirty, but they were producing something real. They weren't investing imaginary money or planning scams. They were cleaning and preparing. They were being useful. Near midnight, when we had already served dessert and coffee, the kitchen door burst open. A respectful silence fell. It was Senator Montemayor. He came with his face flushed from wine and happiness, accompanied by his wife and Roberto, my lawyer. "Where is the artist?" the senator boomed with a huge smile. All the cooks pointed at me. I wiped my hands on the apron and walked toward him. "Senator, I hope the meat was cooked to your liking," I said with a slight bow. "Perfect, Adelaida. Woman, it was perfect." The senator took my hands and kissed them. "My guests can't stop talking about the sauce. They say, Banquetes La Orquídea has been reborn better than ever." "La Orquídea has always had good roots, Senator," I replied, smiling. At that moment, the senator looked over my shoulder toward the washing area. His eyes narrowed when he recognized the hunched figure over the sink. "Isn't that Rogelio over there?" he asked, confused. Rogelio froze. He had foam up to his elbows and his shirt soaked with dirty water. He turned slowly, red with shame. He wanted to hide. He wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. "Yes, Senator," I intervened quickly, before Rogelio could invent a lie. "It's Rogelio. He's learning the business from the bottom, as it should be. Today, he's in charge of deep cleaning." The senator let out a thunderous laugh, slapping Roberto on the back. "Wow, that is discipline, Adelaida. Learning from the bottom. Very good, very good. Honest work never dishonors anyone, right, Rogelio?" Rogelio lowered his head, humiliated but trapped. "That's right, Senator," he replied in a hoarse voice. "Honest work." "Well, keep it up, young man. Maybe one day you'll have half the talent of your mother-in-law." The senator said goodbye and returned to the party. The kitchen erupted in murmurs and contained laughter, but I raised my hand asking for silence. I looked at Rogelio. He hadn't moved. He was staring at the soapy water as if it were a mirror of his soul. I approached him. "Wash that pot well, Rogelio," I said softly, just for him. The senator is right. There's no dishonor in cleaning other people's things. The dishonor is creating the mess and not wanting to clean it. You're paying your debts. Keep going. He nodded without looking at me and scrubbed harder than before. The party ended at 2 in the morning. The waiters left with their tips in their pockets. The cooks cleaned the stations. The kitchen was impeccable, shining, silent. Only the three of us remained. Lorena was sitting on the bench, exhausted, with a Band-Aid on her index finger where she had cut herself. Rogelio was leaning against the sink, breathing heavily, arms trembling with fatigue. I opened the small safe I had installed in the pantry. I took out 2 500-peso bills and 2 plastic containers with banquet leftovers, filet, puree, and a bit of cake. I walked over to them and placed the money and food on the stainless steel table. "Your pay," I said. Lorena looked at the 500-peso bill as if it were a fortune. She, who used to spend that on a trendy coffee, now saw it as the result of 5 hours of peeling potatoes and carrots. She took it with her dirty hands and put it in the pocket of her jeans. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, and there was no sarcasm. There was gratitude. Rogelio took his bill and stared at it. "Tomorrow," he began, clearing his throat. "Tomorrow we have to clean the grease traps, right?" I looked at him surprised. I didn't expect him to return. I thought his pride would make him flee as soon as his stomach was full. "Yes, the grease traps and the ovens. It's dirty work. We'll come at 8, he said, taking the food container. "We need the money, and I need to learn how to do this. If I'm going to be a real manager one day, I need to know how much it costs to wash a pot." I smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory, but of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the parasite was starting to become a man. "At 8 sharp. If you're 1 minute late, the door will be closed. And Rogelio, bring work clothes. That suit has already given what it had to give." They nodded and walked toward the back door. Before leaving, Lorena stopped and turned. "Mom," she said, leaning on the door frame, "the old house feels very big and very empty. Houses fill up with life, Lorena, not with furniture. Learn to live first, and then the house will feel better. Or sell it, I don't care anymore. My home is here." They went out into the dark alley. I closed the door and slid the bolt. Click, a definitive sound. I was alone in my kitchen. I poured myself a glass of the leftover wine, a deep, aromatic Cabernet. I walked to the window overlooking the backyard. The moon illuminated my herbs, my guava tree, my little kingdom. I looked at my hands reflected in the glass. They were wrinkled, with prominent blue veins like rivers, stained by sun and time. But they were not useless hands. They were hands that had built an empire, that had raised children, and that, when necessary, had destroyed toxicity to save the family. Lorena and Rogelio had a long road ahead, perhaps years to understand the value of what they lost and what they could gain. But today they had peeled potatoes and washed dishes. Today they had begun. I, Adelaida, turned 80 2 days ago. My daughter told me to stay in my room, that my time had passed. She was wrong. My time is now, because old age is not the end of the book. It is simply the chapter where the protagonist has more experience, less fear, and definitely better seasoning. I took a sip of wine and felt the warmth travel through my body. Tomorrow I had to get up early. I had to check inventory, plan next week's menu, and supervise my 2 new apprentices. I smiled at my reflection. "Happy birthday, Adelaida," I said to myself. The party has just begun.